The president says that while he waits for negotiators to rapidly make a deal, the U.S. is standing by, locked and loaded, in case Iran continues its aggression in the region. Meanwhile, Democrats are using the conflict as an excuse to attack the Trump administration.
What we're seeing here is a president who has an approach to this that's just rather erratic. Here's a guy who got us into this without a strategic goal, without a plan, without a timeline. He's got a Secretary of Defense that doesn't know how to manage this war.
Joining us now is a member of the Senate Armed Services and Senate Foreign Relations Committees, Senator Rick Scott. Senator, thank you for joining us tonight. We truly appreciate it. I would love your reaction to President Trump's, just a few minutes ago, actually, talking about, I think he said that they are going to communicate through negotiation as early as tomorrow, and that, hopes to make a deal because he doesn't want to, in his words, launch the largest attack since World War II.
Well, I think anybody likes war. And this president clearly doesn't like war. He doesn't want to put troops on the ground. But here's the bottom line. I mean, he had the guts to finally say, after we had presidents that sat there and appeased Iran, he finally said, you're not going to have a nuclear weapon. You're not going to continue to kill Americans. So he had the guts to do it. So I know he's given diplomacy a chance. Do I believe it's going to work? Probably not. Do I believe we're going to have to go in and bomb the hell out of him? Probably, because unless there's a regime change, I think whatever we do now, we're probably going to have to keep doing it, because they're going to keep trying to get a nuclear weapon until we completely destroy their ability to do anything. So it's just a reality. We have people in the world that hate our guts, and so we better have a military to be able to defend us and have a president that can do it.
Let me follow up Senator Kevin Corke here, and I like to call him governor, too, because I used to live in the great state of Florida. Always great to have you with us on the program. If I could follow up, though, I just want to ask you this. From your perspective, and I know you've had high-level conversations with the administration about what has been happening, how do we as a nation interpret what the conversation has been like behind the scenes? And I ask you that because a lot of people get frustrated. They say, listen, finish the job and stop talking about it, instead of constantly coming back and saying, let's give peace a chance.
Well, first off, I think this is a president that has no interest in being at war, and I think there's different groups in Iran that are talking to the administration, and they're saying they want to get something done. Unfortunately, they have not all been able to come together to make that happen. So I hope diplomacy works. It's the first step, is what we ought to be doing. But if it doesn't, the president actually doesn't have a choice. If he cares about the American public, which President Trump does, he has no choice but destroy their ability to do everything he can to make sure they never have a nuclear weapon or ballistic missiles, or can never, ever kill Americans. But it's never going to stop until there's a new regime.
Senator, it's Kayleigh McGee-White. I want to turn to the efforts to hold bad actors accountable for their actions during COVID. Today, HHS Secretary R-Fla Jr. got into a very heated debate with CNN host Donna Bash over their coverage of the COVID vaccine. Watch this.
Doctors who are saying you're doing it wrong are being marginalized and vilified.
Yeah,
and
because again, I really want to move on, but
yeah,
you were saying you were
yes, I do. Part of the problem.
No, I wasn't part of the problem.
There was absolute press malpractice. You were beating up
My job
people
is also
who were dissenting.
No. Okay, you want to sit here and attack me, or do you want to have conversations about public health? I'm not attacking you.
Yikes. And you were also at Dr. Anthony Fauci's Senate Homeland Security Committee hearing, where he invoked the Fifth Amendment 111 times to avoid answering your questions and others. Well, Chairman Rand Paul says that he's going to hold a vote this week to hold Fauci in contempt over that. Tell us a little bit about that upcoming vote. I understand that it would take a simple majority to pass, but first it has to get past that 60-vote filibuster. This is coming up pretty frequently now, where many, many priorities from Republicans are being frustrated by that filibuster. So tell us a little bit about what you expect.
Well, first off, Rand, you have to admire what Rand has done. Rand Paul has taken the time to get, to release documents, organize the documents, make sure Fauci had to show up and try to answer. Every one of us can talk about our families. In my family, I have two daughters with kids. They had no idea what they should do. Should they take the vaccine? Should they not take the vaccine? I have plenty of people in my office that were having babies. And, do I take the vaccine if I'm pregnant? Do I not? What do I do with my newborn baby? All this stuff. I mean, and think about people that couldn't tell their loved ones goodbye because of Fauci's decisions. And by the way, the media helped him. They defended him. They attacked the people that disagreed with him. And so people, why don't they just acknowledge they made a mistake? That's the easiest thing, is just say, you know what, I made a mistake. But they can't do it. The media can't do it. Fauci can't do it. It's wrong. So I'm going to vote to hold him in contempt. And I hope he goes. I hope ultimately what happens is after he's held in contempt, the same thing that happened to Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro. You get held accountable. I mean, it wasn't fair what happened to them, but I hope Fauci would be fair.
Yeah, that would certainly be nice to see some accountability for those complicit in the COVID situation. All right, Senator Scott, I do want to turn to this. So Biden-appointed federal judge blocked the DOJ from accessing New Jersey's unredacted voter rolls on Wednesday after thousands of non-citizens were registered to vote in the state. This, of course, comes as President Trump calls for the Senate to cancel its August recess until the Save America Act is passed and is urging Leader Thune to scrap that filibuster. Senator, we've talked about this so often on this show, and so many Americans are so frustrated that even after the news out of New Jersey, and I'm sure many other states, we still can't get just even bare minimum voter ID, proof of citizenship. Where are we honestly and transparently when it comes to the Save America Act? Please be honest with our audience. Is there a chance that this is going to happen?
Well, we ought to be voting on it every week, and even if we can't get the whole thing passed, vote on parts of it. And I believe we ought to force people to talk. That's how the filibuster is supposed to work. And then when people are done talking, you vote. It only takes 50 votes. But that's not where we are. What we can do this week is we're going to have hopefully a reconciliation vote this week, which will get as much in the Save America Act in the reconciliation vote, which only takes Republican votes, and get that started this week. It won't be finished this week. Ron Johnson, the chair of the Budget Committee, and hopefully that's what we'll be doing all day Wednesday and all night Wednesday night to get everything we can in the Save America Act passed inside reconciliation, and then work with the White House to see what else they can do from an administrative standpoint. I think we ought to stay up here to get things done. I'm a business guy. I work 7 days a week. We're working 2.5 days a week. We're barely up here. We need to stick around and get stuff done.
Senator Rick Scott, thank you for joining us. Thank you for answering all of our questions. We really appreciate it.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Senator.
Thanks so much.
All right, guys, we'll bring it out to the table. I think he had the most to say probably about Dr. Fauci. He said, listen, what Rand Paul is doing isn't partisan. It's necessary to defend the rights of Americans and to right what was wrong through someone with a lot of government power.
Yeah. Highest paid federal government employee, I believe, as well as Dr. Anthony Fauci. And he got that, of course, preemptive pardon from Joe Biden. So it's really a wonder why he felt the need to plead the Fifth. And, to our guest yesterday, Alex Berenson, saying this guy is such an egomaniac, we thought maybe he would say something because he has in the past. But, I think we're looking for accountability. It would be nice to get an acknowledgement, an apology, and not just because of everything that happened with COVID and all of the whatever you want to call it, that he put us through, but also so that it never happens again. I think that's the part of this. We don't leave the door open for them to ever do this to us, ever again. So I would love to see some accountability. I don't know if we're going to get it, but I appreciate Senator Rand Paul for being a dog with a bone for this.
Kevin, he said that he thinks we'll have to go back to war. Basically, he didn't have a lot of faith in a deal, said President Trump doesn't want to be in war, but he thinks that the only way really to handle Iran is to beat them into submission.
I think that's exactly what a lot of the people who are around the president are making that suggestion repeatedly. They're saying, listen, yes, it's good to take a pause. It's great to try to negotiate, but maybe it's better if you negotiate while you're still hitting them and actually force them to capitulate. But I think regional partners are why we're trying to sort of step back a little bit, and I understand why the administration would want to do that. The president is a deal maker. We're hoping for the very best, again, beginning tomorrow afternoon.
Kaylee, looks like Save America Act is dead. They're going to try to get some of it through with a budget reconciliation.
Yeah, which the parliamentarian is going to just strike down right away. We all sort of know that going into
Somebody else who they should have gotten rid of.
Well, exactly. And, to Tommy's point about accountability, the only way that we get accountability is if Senate Republicans are willing to take action. We've talked a lot about the looming threat from the DSA left. Well, the alternative is Senate Republicans and congressional Republicans doing what they were elected to do. Otherwise, voters are going to put people in Congress who will do things. They will abolish the filibuster. They will pack the Supreme Court. They're going to do all of that on day one. They're going to have absolutely no hesitation about doing any of it. So Senate Republicans refusing to do things, even like introducing a separate, clean resolution for only voter ID, nothing else from the Save America Act, force every single Republican in that chamber to go on record about a clean voter ID provision. Why have we not already done that? It's a little bit baffling to me that they can't even be there for 5 days a week. He said that they're there for 2.5 days a week right now. That's really insulting.
All right. Yeah. We'll see. It could have been a definitive piece of legislation for the midterms, and maybe it will, the lack thereof.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.